Good evening, and welcome to The Quiet Scientist. As the world outside slowly settles into silence, allow yourself to breathe a little deeper, relax into your pillow, and let the noise of the day gently fade away. Tonight, we begin a quiet journey toward the farthest edges of understanding, drifting calmly into questions that humans have wondered about for as long as we have looked up at the sky. Before we begin, I find myself wondering where you are listening from this evening. Wherever you are, it is a comfort to have you here. If this is your first time visiting The Quiet Scientist, you are very welcome. Taking a moment to like this video or subscribe helps these calm explorations reach other curious minds searching for quiet moments like this one. And to those of you who return night after night, thank you. You are the gentle gravity that allows this small universe to continue growing. If you wish, you may also turn on notifications so you do not miss our next slow drift through science and wonder. Now, my hope is that this video will be soothing enough to let your thoughts soften and your eyelids grow heavy. But if you happen to remain awake, then at least you will be resting quietly, learning something new, as we begin to explore tonight's question. Does space end? It is a simple question to ask. 4 words. But it is not a simple question to hold. It is the kind of question that opens rather than closes. It does not lead to a single answer. It does not demand a response. It simply sits there, waiting, and the more we consider it, the more it seems to shift and expand, like something alive, like something that cannot be pinned down or solved or finished. Does space end? We have always looked up. Long before there were telescopes or satellites or spacecraft, long before there were words for galaxies or light years or cosmic horizons, we looked up. We stood beneath the sky and wondered. We watched the stars move slowly across the darkness. We watched the moon change shape. We watched the sun rise and fall again and again, marking the days, marking the seasons, marking our lives. And in those moments, when the sky was clear and the stars were visible, there was always this question, even if we did not say it aloud. Where does it all go? Where does it end? Is there a place beyond the stars? Is there a wall, a boundary, a final edge where everything simply stops? The question has taken many forms. In some cultures, people imagined the sky as a dome, a great ceiling arching over the earth, with the stars fixed upon it like lights or jewels. In other places, the sky was imagined as an ocean, vast and endless, with the stars floating upon its surface. There were stories of gods and spirits living beyond the sky, tending to the movements of the heavens, keeping the stars in their proper places. But even with these stories, even with these explanations, the question remained. Because no matter how we imagined the sky, no matter what story we told ourselves about what lay beyond it, there was always the sense that something more was out there. Something we could not see, something we could not reach, something that went on and on, perhaps forever, or perhaps to some place we could not yet imagine. Does space end? It is a question that feels larger than ourselves. It is a question that makes us small. When we stand beneath the night sky and consider it, really consider it, we begin to feel the vastness pressing in around us. We begin to sense the scale of things, the tremendous distances, the unimaginable sizes, and we realize that we are very, very small, that our entire world is small, that everything we know, everything we have ever known, is contained within a tiny corner of something much larger. And yet the question does not frighten us, or perhaps it does, but it fascinates us more than it frightens us. It draws us in. It makes us curious. It makes us want to know more, even if we suspect that we may never truly know. Even if we suspect that the answer, if there is an answer, may be beyond our ability to understand. Does space end? The question has changed over time, but it has not disappeared. As our understanding of the universe has grown, as we have learned more about the stars and the galaxies and the vast distances between them, the question has evolved. It has become more precise in some ways, more scientific, more grounded in observation and measurement. But it has also become stranger, more abstract, more difficult to hold in our minds. We know now that the stars are not fixed upon a dome above us. We know that they are distant suns, some of them millions or billions of times farther away than our own sun. We know that the universe is vast beyond comprehension, that it contains billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, each separated by distances so large that light itself, moving faster than anything we know, takes millions or billions of years to cross them. And still, we ask, does space end? Because even with all this knowledge, even with all these measurements and observations, we have not answered the question. We have only pushed it further out. We have learned that the universe is larger than we thought, stranger than we thought, more complex than we thought. But we have not found an edge. We have not found a boundary. We have not found a place where space simply stops. Perhaps there is no such place. Perhaps space goes on forever, endlessly, without limit or boundary. Or perhaps there is an edge, but it is an edge we cannot reach, an edge that lies beyond the farthest reaches of our telescopes, beyond the limits of what we can observe, beyond the horizon of what is knowable. Does space end? It is worth sitting with this question for a while, not to answer it, not to solve it, but simply to be with it, to let it settle into our thoughts, to feel its weight, to allow ourselves to wonder without needing to conclude. Because there is something peaceful in not knowing. There is something restful in letting a question remain a question. In our daily lives, we are so often pressed to find answers, to make decisions, to understand things quickly and move on. But here, with this question, we can pause, we can slow down, we can let the question exist without demanding that it be resolved. Does space end? We might imagine what it would mean if space did end. We might picture, in some vague way, a final boundary, a place where everything simply stops. But what would that boundary be? A wall? A membrane? A place where space itself ceases to exist? And if space ends, what lies beyond it? What is on the other side of that boundary? Is there anything at all? Or is there simply nothing? An absence so complete that even the concept of beyond loses its meaning. These are strange thoughts. They do not come easily to us. Our minds are built for the world we inhabit, a world of objects and distances, of beginnings and endings, of things that can be measured and understood. But space, the universe, the cosmos, these things do not always behave according to the rules we are used to. They stretch our thinking. They challenge our assumptions. They force us to consider possibilities that feel impossible, contradictions that somehow coexist, ideas that seem to fold back on themselves in ways we cannot quite grasp. Does space end? Or we might imagine the opposite. We might try to picture space going on forever, endlessly, without any boundary at all. But this too is difficult, because what does it mean for something to have no end? We can say the words, we can understand them in an abstract way, but to truly hold the concept in our minds, to really feel what it means for space to be infinite, to go on and on without stopping, without limit, without any final point, this is almost impossible. Our experience is shaped by limits. Everything we encounter in our daily lives has boundaries. A room has walls, a city has edges. Even the earth, vast as it is, has a surface, a shape, a definite size. We are accustomed to things ending. We are accustomed to reaching the limits of things. And so the idea of something that has no limits, no boundaries, no ending, it is an idea that slips away from us even as we try to grasp it. Does space end? And yet, here we are, asking the question. Not because we need to know the answer, not because our lives depend on it, but because the question itself is worth asking, because there is something deeply human in looking up at the sky and wondering. Because the act of asking, of considering, of allowing ourselves to be uncertain, this is part of what makes us who we are. Humans have always been curious. We have always asked questions about the world around us, about the sky above us, about the nature of things. And this question, this particular question, does space end, is perhaps one of the most fundamental questions we can ask. It is a question about the nature of reality itself, about whether the universe is finite or infinite, about whether there are limits to existence, or whether existence simply goes on, unbounded, without end. Does space end? There is no urgency in this question. It does not need to be answered tonight. It does not need to be answered at all. It can simply exist, quietly, in the background, as it has existed for thousands of years. We can carry it with us, lightly, without burden. We can return to it from time to time, when the mood strikes us, when we find ourselves beneath the night sky, when we have a moment of quiet reflection. And perhaps, in the asking, in the wondering, in the simple act of considering the question without demanding an answer, we find something valuable. Not knowledge, necessarily, not certainty, but a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves, a sense of humility in the face of the vastness, a recognition that there are things we do not know, may never know, and that this is not a failure, but simply a fact, a part of what it means to be human, a part of what it means to exist in this strange, beautiful, mysterious universe. Does space end? The question sits there, patient and still, as it always has. It does not push, it does not demand. It simply waits, inviting us to wonder, to imagine, to let our thoughts drift outward, beyond the familiar, beyond the known, into the vast and quiet darkness that surrounds us. And we can accept that invitation. We can let ourselves wonder. We can let the question be enough, just as it is, without needing anything more. Does space end? We do not need to know. We can simply ask. We can simply sit with the question. We can simply be here, now, beneath the stars, considering the possibility of endlessness, or the possibility of an edge, or the possibility that the truth is something we cannot yet imagine. And in that consideration, in that quiet wondering, there is a kind of peace, a kind of rest, a gentle acknowledgement that some questions are worth asking simply for the asking, and that the mystery itself, the not knowing, is something we can hold carefully, something we can appreciate, something we can allow to exist without needing to resolve it. Does space end? The question remains. It has always remained. And perhaps it always will. And that, in its own way, is perfectly all right. We might begin by imagining ourselves moving outward, not quickly, not with any sense of purpose or destination, but slowly, gently, drifting away from where we are, away from the familiar, into the vastness that surrounds us. We might picture ourselves rising up, away from the ground, away from the surface of the earth. Not flying, exactly, not traveling in any mechanical sense, but simply moving, floating, drifting upward into the sky. The details of the world below begin to soften. The individual trees, the buildings, the roads, they begin to blend together. They become patterns, they become textures, and as we continue to rise, they become smaller still, until they are barely visible at all. And we keep moving outward. There is no hurry, there is no schedule. We are simply moving, slowly, steadily, away from the earth. The sky around us grows darker, the blue fades, the atmosphere thins, and soon we find ourselves in that place, between the earth and everything else. That place where the sky is no longer sky, but something else. Something deeper, something darker, something that goes on and on. We are moving outward. The earth below us is round now. We can see its curve. We can see the way the light falls across its surface, illuminating one side while the other remains in shadow. We can see the clouds moving slowly across the face of it, white and grey, shifting and changing. We can see the oceans, vast and blue. We can see the continents, brown and green, their shapes familiar even from this distance. But we are still moving outward, and as we move, the earth begins to shrink, not because it is getting smaller, but because we are getting farther away. What once filled our entire view now occupies only a portion of it, and then less than that, and then less still. The earth becomes a sphere hanging in the darkness, a blue and white sphere, beautiful and fragile, suspended in the emptiness around it. We are moving outward, and we might pause here for a moment to simply observe this, to see the earth from this distance, to notice how small it looks, how delicate, how alone. There is nothing else around it, just darkness, just space, just the emptiness that extends in every direction, without apparent limit, without apparent end. But we do not stop, we continue moving outward. The moon passes by. It is closer than we might have expected, but still distant. A grey sphere, pocked and cratered, silent and still. It hangs there in the darkness, following its slow orbit around the earth. We watch it as we pass. We notice its surface, rough and ancient, untouched by wind or water or weather. And then it too begins to recede behind us as we continue moving outward. We are drifting further now. The earth and the moon together become a pair, two spheres, one large and one small, bound together by forces we cannot see. They turn slowly around each other as they travel through space, and we are moving away from them. We are leaving them behind, not abandoning them, not forgetting them, but simply moving, continuing our slow drift outward into the vastness that surrounds them. And the darkness around us is not empty. There is light. There is the sun, brilliant and bright, too bright to look at directly even from this distance. It hangs there in the darkness, a sphere of light, a sphere of heat and energy, pouring itself out endlessly into the space around it. Its light reaches us. Its warmth touches us, even here, even at this distance. But we are moving outward, and soon we will move beyond its warmth, beyond its light, into the colder, darker regions that lie further out. We are moving outward. The other planets begin to appear, not all at once, not in any orderly fashion, but gradually, as we continue our drift, we begin to notice them. Mars, red and small, orbiting the Sun at its own pace. Jupiter, massive and banded, with its many moons circling around it like a miniature solar system unto itself. Saturn, with its rings, those impossible, beautiful rings, thin as paper, yet stretching for thousands of miles. And beyond them, the others, smaller, dimmer, harder to see. We are moving outward, and we might notice as we drift past these worlds how far apart they are, how much emptiness lies between them. The distances are vast, unimaginably vast. Even moving as we are, drifting steadily outward, it takes time to pass from one world to the next. Not minutes or hours, but days, weeks, months. The space between them is not filled with anything. It is simply space, empty, dark, silent. We are moving outward. The sun begins to shrink behind us. It is still bright, still visible, but it is no longer the overwhelming presence it once was. It is becoming just another point of light in the darkness. A star, our star. But from this distance, from this perspective, it is simply one light among many. And as we continue moving outward, it grows smaller still, dimmer still, until it is difficult to distinguish it from the other stars that surround us. We are moving outward, and now the stars are everywhere. They fill the darkness around us. Thousands of them, millions of them, each one a distant sun, burning with its own light, pouring out its own energy into the emptiness of space. Some are bright, some are dim, some are white, some are blue, some are red, some are yellow. They are scattered across the darkness like salt spilled across a black cloth, and they are all so far away. We are moving outward. We might try to choose one star and move toward it. We might pick one that looks bright, one that seems closer than the others, and we might begin drifting in that direction. But even moving as we are, even drifting steadily through space, the star does not seem to get closer. It remains where it is, a point of light in the darkness, unchanging, unreachable. Because the distances between stars are not like the distances between planets. They are not measured in millions of miles, but in trillions. In distances so vast that light itself, traveling faster than anything we know, takes years to cross them. We are moving outward, and we might continue like this, drifting through the darkness, passing between the stars, for a very long time, years, decades, centuries. And still we would find ourselves surrounded by stars, by that same darkness, by that same vast emptiness. The scenery would change, slowly, gradually. Different stars would come into view, others would fade behind us, but the fundamental nature of the experience would remain the same. Space, darkness, stars scattered across the distance, and always, always more space beyond. We are moving outward. The galaxy itself begins to reveal its shape, not all at once, not suddenly, but slowly. As we pull back further and further, we begin to see the pattern. The stars are not scattered randomly. They are arranged. They form a structure, a great spiral, turning slowly in the darkness. Arms of stars, curving outward from a bright center, rotating together in a slow, majestic dance, that takes millions of years to complete. We are moving outward, and we might pause here again for a moment to simply observe, to see the galaxy as a whole, to see the way it hangs there in the darkness, an island of light in an ocean of emptiness, to notice its beauty, its size, its age. Billions of stars, all bound together by gravity, all moving together through space, all part of this single vast structure. But we do not stop. We are moving outward. And as we continue to move, the galaxy begins to shrink. It becomes smaller. It becomes one object among many. Because there are other galaxies out there, thousands of them, millions of them, scattered across the darkness in every direction. Some are spirals like ours. Some are elliptical, shaped like glowing clouds. Some are irregular, asymmetrical, chaotic, and they are all so far apart. We are moving outward. The distances between galaxies are even more vast than the distances between stars. They are measured not in trillions of miles, but in millions of trillions, in distances so large that we struggle to comprehend them. Light takes millions of years to cross from one galaxy to another, and we are moving through this darkness, this emptiness, drifting past these islands of light, seeing them grow dim behind us as we continue outward. We are moving outward, and we might wonder, as we drift, whether there is any end to this, whether there is a point at which we would stop seeing galaxies, whether there is a boundary, an edge, a place where the galaxies simply stop appearing, or whether we would continue like this forever, drifting endlessly through space, passing galaxy after galaxy after galaxy, never reaching any final point, never arriving at any ultimate destination. We are moving outward. The question sits with us as we drift. It does not demand an answer. It simply exists, quietly, in the background of our awareness. Does space end? Is there a point beyond which there is nothing? Or does it simply go on forever, without limit, without boundary, without any final edge? We are moving outward, and perhaps we notice, as we continue this slow drift, that the experience itself has a kind of rhythm to it, a kind of repetition. We move away from one thing and toward another. We see something shrink behind us. We see something else appear ahead. We cross vast distances of emptiness. We encounter points of light. We move past them. We continue on, and the pattern repeats, again and again, outward and outward and outward. We are moving outward. There is something almost meditative about this, something calming, the steady motion, the vast emptiness, the slow passage of time. We are not rushing. We are not hurrying. We are simply moving, drifting, existing in this space, letting the experience unfold at its own pace. We are moving outward, and we might let ourselves settle into this motion. We might let go of any need to arrive somewhere, any need to reach a destination, any need to find an answer or a conclusion. We are simply here, now, moving through space, observing what there is to observe, allowing the vastness to surround us, allowing the darkness to hold us. We are moving outward. The galaxies continue to pass by. Some are bright, some are dim, some are large, some are small, some are alone, some are clustered together in groups, in clusters, bound together by gravity, moving through space as a unit. And we drift past them all, slowly, steadily, always moving outward, always continuing, always proceeding into the darkness that lies beyond. We are moving outward. And perhaps there is no end to this. Perhaps we could continue like this indefinitely. Perhaps space simply goes on, forever, without boundary, without limit. Or perhaps there is an edge somewhere out there, beyond what we can see, beyond what we can imagine. A place where space itself stops. A place where there is no more outward to move toward. We are moving outward, but we do not know. We cannot know. Not from here. Not from this perspective. We can only continue moving, continue drifting, continue observing the vastness that surrounds us. We can only let the experience be what it is. We can only accept the not knowing, the uncertainty, the mystery. We are moving outward, and in this motion, in this slow drift through the darkness, there is a kind of peace, a kind of restfulness. We are not fighting against anything. We are not struggling to understand. We are simply here, moving, existing, being carried along by our own momentum, by our own curiosity, by our own desire to see what lies beyond. We are moving outward, and we might stay here for a while longer, in this state, in this motion, drifting slowly through the vastness, watching the galaxies pass by, feeling the emptiness around us, sensing the immensity of it all, not trying to grasp it, not trying to comprehend it fully, but simply experiencing it, simply being with it, simply allowing ourselves to be small and quiet in the face of something so much larger than ourselves. We are moving outward, always further, always into the darkness, into the space, into the vastness that surrounds us on all sides. And perhaps we will never stop. Perhaps we will continue like this forever, drifting endlessly through the infinite darkness, always moving, always observing, always wondering what lies beyond the next horizon, beyond the next cluster of galaxies, beyond the next vast emptiness. We are moving outward. What would it mean for space to have an edge? What would that be like? What would it feel like to encounter such a thing? These are strange questions. They do not come naturally to us. We are accustomed to edges. We know what it means for something to end. A table has edges. A room has walls. A country has borders. These are familiar concepts. We understand them. We can picture them. We can reach out and touch them. But space is not a table. It is not a room. It is not a country. And so when we ask whether space has an edge, whether it ends somewhere, we find ourselves in unfamiliar territory. We find ourselves trying to imagine something that may not be imaginable. Trying to picture something that may not have any picture at all. What would an edge of space be? We might begin by thinking of it as a boundary, a line, a place where space simply stops, where on one side there is space, and on the other side there is, what? Nothing. But what would nothing be? What would it mean for there to be nothing beyond the edge of space? We use the word nothing quite easily in our daily lives. We say there is nothing in the cupboard. We say there is nothing to worry about. We say there is nothing left to do. But in these cases, we do not really mean nothing. We mean an absence of something specific, an absence of food, an absence of problems, an absence of tasks. But there is still space. There is still air. There is still time. There is still something. But beyond the edge of space, if there were such an edge, there would be no space. And if there is no space, then what is there? Can there be a there if there is no space? Can there be a place if there is no room for anything to exist? These questions fold back on themselves. They become tangled. They resist our attempts to think them through clearly. And perhaps that is appropriate. Perhaps the idea of an edge to space is not something that can be thought through clearly. Perhaps it is something that exists at the limits of what we can conceive. What would an edge of space be? We might try to imagine approaching it. We might picture ourselves traveling through space, moving steadily forward, getting closer and closer to this supposed edge. And as we approach, what would we see? Would there be a wall of some kind? A surface? A membrane? Something that we could reach out and touch? Something that would stop us from going further? But a wall implies something. A wall is made of something. It exists in space. It occupies a position. And if there is a wall at the edge of space, then what is the wall made of? Where does the wall exist? Is it inside space or outside space? And if it is inside space, then there must be space beyond it, and so it cannot truly be the edge. And if it is outside space, then how can it exist at all? What would an edge of space be? Perhaps the edge would not be a physical barrier. Perhaps it would be more subtle than that, more abstract. Perhaps we would simply find that we could not go further, not because something was blocking us, but because there was no further to go, because the concept of further would cease to have meaning, because direction itself would dissolve. But this too is difficult to imagine. How can we picture ourselves unable to go further when there is nothing stopping us? How can we conceive of direction ceasing to exist? Direction is something we understand deeply, fundamentally. Forward and backward, left and right, up and down. These are not abstract concepts for us. They are woven into our experience of the world. They are part of how we navigate, how we move, how we exist. What would an edge of space be? We might think of it differently, not as a place we could travel to, but as a limit to what exists. A boundary, not in space, but of space. The edge would not be somewhere out there, waiting to be discovered. It would be the limit of existence itself. Beyond it, there would be no beyond. Beyond it, the very idea of beyond would be meaningless. But even this is difficult to hold in our minds, because when we think of a limit, we naturally imagine something on both sides of that limit. We imagine standing at the edge of a cliff and seeing the ground below. We imagine reaching the end of a road and seeing the wilderness beyond. We imagine approaching a border and seeing the neighboring country on the other side. Limits, in our experience, always have two sides. But the edge of space, if such a thing exists, would not have two sides. It would have only one. There would be space on this side of the edge, and on the other side there would be not anything, not nothing even, because nothing is still a concept that requires space to make sense. There would simply be no other side. What would an edge of space be? Perhaps we are thinking about this wrongly. Perhaps the question itself contains assumptions that are leading us astray. When we ask about an edge, we are assuming that space is the kind of thing that can have an edge. We are assuming that it is like a container, like a box, like a room with walls. But what if space is not like that? What if space is not a thing at all, but something else? Something that does not fit into our categories of things that can end or continue? We think of space as empty, as a void, as a receptacle in which things exist. We imagine it as a kind of stage upon which the universe unfolds. The galaxies, the stars, the planets, they exist in space. They move through space. Space is the background, the context, the framework within which everything happens. But what if this is not quite right? What if space is not separate from the things that exist in it? What if space and matter and energy are all bound together in some way, all aspects of the same underlying reality? Then the question of whether space ends becomes entangled with questions about whether matter ends, whether energy ends, whether reality itself ends. What would an edge of space be? And if reality ends, what lies beyond reality? The question seems almost nonsensical, like asking what is north of the North Pole, like asking what happened before time began. These questions use words that have meaning in certain contexts, but lose that meaning when applied to the ultimate boundaries of things. Direction makes sense when you are navigating across a surface, but not when you have reached the point where all directions converge. Before makes sense when you are moving through time, but not when you are asking about the origin of time itself. Perhaps beyond space is like that. Perhaps it is a phrase that sounds meaningful, but actually points to something that cannot be captured in language, cannot be pictured in thought, cannot be held in imagination. What would an edge of space be? There is another possibility. Perhaps space is curved. Perhaps if you traveled far enough in one direction, you would eventually return to where you started, like walking around the surface of a sphere. The sphere has no edge. It has no boundary. You can walk forever across its surface and never reach a place where the surface ends. And yet the sphere is finite. It has a definite size. It contains a definite amount of surface area. Could space be like this? Could it curve back on itself in some higher dimensional way that we cannot visualize? Could it be that there is no edge because there is no need for an edge, because space simply loops back, connects to itself, forms a closed shape with no boundary? This is a strange thought. It resolves the problem of the edge by eliminating the edge entirely. But it creates its own strangeness, because if space curves back on itself, then traveling outward far enough would eventually bring us back to where we began. The universe would be like an infinite journey that somehow returns to its starting point, a circle that never ends and yet never extends beyond a certain limit. What would an edge of space be? Or perhaps space is not curved into a closed shape, but is instead infinite. Perhaps it simply goes on forever, in all directions, without any edge or boundary at all. This too is difficult to grasp, not because we cannot say the words, we can say infinite easily enough, but because truly comprehending what it means is another matter entirely. Infinite means without end. It means that no matter how far you travel, there is always farther to go. It means that no matter how much space you have crossed, there is always more space beyond. It means that space never runs out, never reaches a limit, never arrives at a final point. And this is overwhelming in its own way, because we are finite creatures. Our lives are finite. Our thoughts are finite. Everything we know and experience exists within limits. And so the idea of something truly without limits, something that goes on forever, something that has no edge and no boundary, this stretches our understanding to the breaking point. What would an edge of space be? Perhaps the difficulty we are having is not really about space at all. Perhaps it is about the way we think, about the way our minds work. We are creatures who evolved to navigate a particular kind of environment, a world of objects and distances, a world where things have shapes and sizes. A world where edges are clear and boundaries are definite. But space, the cosmos, the universe, these things exist on a scale and in a context that is far removed from the environment we evolved in, and so perhaps it is natural that we struggle to think about them clearly. Perhaps our intuitions, which serve us so well in daily life, are not well suited to questions about the ultimate nature of reality. What would an edge of space be? The question persists. It does not go away just because we find it difficult. It remains there, quiet and patient, waiting for us to return to it. And we can return to it, again and again, turning it over in our minds, examining it from different angles, trying to find some way to make sense of it. But perhaps making sense of it is not really the goal. Perhaps the goal is simply to sit with the question, to feel its weight, to acknowledge its difficulty, to recognize that there are things we do not understand, things we may never understand, and that this is not a failure, but simply a fact. What would an edge of space be? We might imagine it as a place where things change, where the rules that govern existence are different, where space itself transforms into something else, something we have no words for, something we cannot picture. Not a wall, not a boundary, not a line, but a transition. A gradual shift from what we know to what we cannot know. Or we might imagine that there is no edge at all, that the question itself is based on a misunderstanding, that space is not the kind of thing that ends or continues, but is something else entirely, something that exists outside our categories of finite and infinite, bounded and unbounded, ending and endless. What would an edge of space be? The question seems to dissolve even as we ask it. It becomes less clear, less definite, less answerable. And perhaps that is appropriate. Perhaps that is the nature of questions that reach toward the ultimate limits of things. They do not yield to our attempts to pin them down. They remain elusive, mysterious, just beyond our grasp. What would an edge of space be? We do not know. We cannot know. And yet we continue to ask, because the asking itself is valuable, because the attempt to think about these things, even when we cannot think about them clearly, even when our thoughts become tangled and confused, this attempt is part of what makes us human, part of what drives us to explore, to question, to wonder. What would an edge of space be? The question sits there, quiet and still, as it has always sat. It does not demand an answer. It does not insist on being solved. It simply exists, patiently, waiting for us to return to it, to consider it once more, to wonder about it, to let it remain mysterious and strange and, ultimately, perhaps, unanswerable. What would an edge of space be? We may never know. And that, in its own way, is something we can accept. We can let the question be what it is. We can let the mystery remain mysterious. We can let the edge, if there is an edge, remain unseen, unknown, beyond our reach. And we can find a kind of peace in that, a kind of rest, a recognition that not all questions need answers, that some things can simply be wondered about, quietly, without resolution. What would an edge of space be? The question fades, slowly, gently, into the background. It does not disappear. It is still there, but it becomes softer, quieter, less insistent, and we can let it be. We can let it exist without pressing it further. We can simply acknowledge it, hold it lightly, and allow ourselves to rest in the not knowing. Perhaps we have been thinking about space in the wrong way. Perhaps we have been imagining it as something that contains, something that holds, something with limits and edges and boundaries. A box, a room, a container of some kind, something that has an inside and an outside, something that separates what is from what is not. But what if space is not like that at all? What if space is not a container, but an openness? Not a thing that holds other things, but the very possibility of things being. Not a framework or a stage or a background, but something more fundamental, something that cannot be separated from existence itself. When we think of space as a container, we imagine that we could, in principle, remove the container and see what remains. We could empty the box and look at the box itself. We could clear the room and examine the walls. But with space, this does not work. There is no way to remove space and examine it separately. There is no way to step outside of space and look at it from the outside, because to step outside would require space to step into. To look would require space to look through. Space is always already here, always already present. It is not something added to reality. It is not something that comes after. It is woven into the fabric of what is. It is inseparable from being itself. And if this is true, then perhaps the question of whether space ends is not really a question about boundaries or limits. Perhaps it is a question about the nature of openness itself, about what it means for there to be room for things to exist, about what it means for there to be distance, separation, extension. What would it mean for openness to end? It is a strange question, because openness is not the kind of thing that occupies a place. It is not the kind of thing that takes up room. Openness is what allows things to occupy places, what allows things to take up room. It is prior to those things. It is the condition of their possibility. And so when we ask whether openness ends, we are asking whether the condition of possibility itself has limits, whether there is a point beyond which things cannot be, whether there is a boundary to what can exist. But this feels different from asking whether space ends in the sense of a container running out of room. This is asking something deeper, something about the nature of reality itself, about whether existence is limited or unlimited, about whether being has boundaries or extends without limit. What would it mean for openness to end? We might sit with this for a moment, not trying to answer it, not trying to solve it, but simply holding it, feeling its weight, noticing how it shifts our understanding of the question, how it takes us from thinking about space as a thing to thinking about space as a kind of fundamental openness that allows things to be. And in this shift, something changes. The question becomes less about measurement and more about meaning, less about finding an edge and more about understanding what space is, less about discovery and more about recognition. What would it mean for openness to end? If openness is not a container, then it does not have walls, it does not have boundaries in the usual sense, it is not limited by anything external to itself. Because there is nothing external to it. There is no outside to openness. Outside is a concept that only makes sense within openness. Outside requires space. Outside requires distance. Outside requires the very thing we are asking about. So perhaps space, understood as openness, cannot end in the way we typically imagine endings. Because an ending would require something beyond the ending, a place where space stops and something else begins. But there is no something else. There is no beyond. There is only space itself, only openness itself, extending in all directions, allowing all things to be. What would it mean for openness to end? We might notice that we keep returning to this question. We keep circling around it, not because we are avoiding an answer, but because the question itself resists being answered in any straightforward way. It keeps opening up new dimensions. It keeps revealing new layers of complexity. It keeps showing us that what we thought was a simple question about boundaries is actually a much deeper question about the nature of existence. And perhaps this is appropriate. Perhaps questions about the ultimate nature of things should be like this, should resist easy answers, should require us to think more carefully, more slowly, more patiently, should invite us to sit with uncertainty rather than rushing to conclusions. What would it mean for openness to end? There is something peaceful in this way of thinking, in letting go of the need for space to be a container with definite limits, in allowing space to be something more open, more fluid, more fundamental, in recognizing that we do not need to find an edge in order for space to make sense. That space can be understood as openness itself, as the very condition that allows anything to exist, and that this openness need not have boundaries in order to be real. What would it mean for openness to end? We might think about our own experience of space, the way we move through it, the way we reach out and touch things, the way we walk from one place to another. In all of this, we are experiencing space as openness, as room, as the possibility of movement and change and difference. We are not experiencing space as a container with walls. We are experiencing it as a kind of fundamental allowance, a permission, a making room for. And this experience does not suggest boundaries. It does not suggest limits. It suggests, if anything, that space is characterized by its lack of boundaries, by its capacity to accommodate, by its willingness, so to speak, to allow things to be where they are, and to change and to move and to exist in relation to one another. What would it mean for openness to end? Perhaps it would mean that at some point there would be no more room for things to exist, no more possibility of movement, no more capacity for change. The openness would close. The allowance would be withdrawn. Things would press up against some ultimate limit and find that they could go no further, not because something was blocking them, but because the very nature of space itself had changed, because openness had given way to closure. But even trying to imagine this, we find ourselves struggling, because closure implies something. Closure implies a boundary, a limit, a wall. And we have already seen how difficult it is to imagine what a boundary of space would be. How such a boundary would have to exist somewhere, would have to be made of something, would have to occupy space. And if it occupies space, then there is space beyond it, and so it cannot truly be the boundary. What would it mean for openness to end? The question circles back on itself. It resists resolution. And perhaps this is telling us something. Perhaps it is telling us that space, understood as openness, cannot end in any way that makes sense to us. That the very concept of an ending relies on assumptions that do not apply to fundamental openness. That we are trying to apply categories that work well for ordinary objects, things that have edges and boundaries and limits, to something that is not an ordinary object at all. What would it mean for openness to end? We might let go of the question for a moment. Not because we are giving up on it, but because sometimes understanding comes not from pressing harder, but from releasing our grip, from allowing things to be as they are rather than forcing them into shapes that feel familiar. And when we let go, when we stop trying to make space fit into the category of things that can end, something else becomes possible. We can simply appreciate space for what it is, for the way it allows everything to be, for the way it provides room and distance and separation and connection, for the way it makes movement possible, for the way it gives us somewhere to exist. What would it mean for openness to end? Space, as openness, is generous. It does not push back against things. It does not resist their presence. It simply allows. It accommodates. It makes room. And this making room is not a finite resource that can be used up. It is not something that diminishes as more things come into being. It is always already sufficient. Always already enough. Always already capable of allowing whatever needs to exist. And if this is true, then perhaps the question of whether space ends is misguided from the start. Perhaps it assumes that space is the kind of thing that could run out, that could be exhausted, that could reach some limit. But openness does not run out. Allowance does not get exhausted. The capacity to make room does not reach a limit beyond which there can be no more room. What would it mean for openness to end? We sit with this. We let it settle. We notice how it feels different from our earlier ways of thinking about the question, how it shifts our perspective, how it invites us to see space not as a thing among other things, but as something more fundamental, something that cannot be understood in the same way we understand ordinary objects, something that requires a different kind of thinking, a different kind of attention. What would it mean for openness to end? And perhaps we begin to notice that this question, as we continue to return to it, is becoming less about finding an answer and more about deepening our understanding, about learning to think in new ways, about recognizing the limits of our usual categories and concepts, about opening ourselves to possibilities that do not fit neatly into the frameworks we are accustomed to using. What would it mean for openness to end? There is a kind of meditation in this, a kind of contemplative practice. We are not trying to solve a problem. We are not trying to arrive at a destination. We are simply here, with this question, allowing it to work on us, allowing it to shape our thinking, allowing it to reveal aspects of reality that we might not otherwise notice. What would it mean for openness to end? Space, as openness, is not separate from time. The two are interwoven. Space provides room for things to exist. Time provides duration for things to persist. Together, they create the conditions under which change is possible, under which events can occur, under which stories can unfold, under which we can be here, now, asking these questions, sitting with these thoughts, existing in this moment. And just as we are asking whether space ends, we might also ask whether time ends, whether duration has a limit, whether there is a final moment beyond which there are no more moments, and the same difficulties arise, the same tangles and paradoxes, the same sense that we are trying to apply concepts that work well in ordinary contexts to something extraordinary, something ultimate, something that resists being captured in our usual ways of thinking. What would it mean for openness to end? We might notice that we have been asking this question many times now. We have been returning to it again and again, and each time we ask it, it feels slightly different. Not because the words have changed, but because we have changed. Because our understanding has shifted, however subtly. Because we are learning to hold the question in a new way, with less urgency, with more patience, with greater acceptance of the fact that some questions do not yield to our desire for answers. What would it mean for openness to end? And in this repetition, in this patient returning, there is something calming, something soothing. The rhythm of the question, the way it cycles back, the way it invites us to stay present, to remain attentive, to keep thinking without needing to arrive anywhere. This is not frustration. This is not confusion. This is a kind of contemplative dwelling, a resting in the question itself. What would it mean for openness to end? Perhaps openness does not end. Perhaps it simply is, eternal in some sense. Not eternal in the sense of going on and on through time, but eternal in the sense of being outside of time altogether, not subject to beginning or ending, because it is the condition of all beginnings and endings. Not something that exists within the flow of time, but something that allows time to flow. And if this is true, then asking whether openness ends is like asking whether existence itself ends, whether reality has a boundary, whether being is limited or unlimited. These are not questions we can answer with observations or measurements. These are questions that touch the very foundations of what is. Questions that philosophers have grappled with for thousands of years. Questions that science approaches but cannot fully resolve. Questions that remain open perpetually, inviting each generation to think about them anew. What would it mean for openness to end? We let the question sit. We let it be. We do not push it away. We do not demand that it give us something. We simply allow it to exist in our awareness, quietly, patiently, without urgency. And in this allowing, in this gentle attention, there is a kind of understanding, not an intellectual understanding that can be put into words, but a deeper understanding, a felt sense of what space is, of what openness means, of the mysterious nature of existence itself. What would it mean for openness to end? Space, as openness, receives everything. It does not judge, it does not discriminate. It makes room for stars and planets, for galaxies and voids, for light and darkness, for all that is and all that could be. It is infinitely hospitable, infinitely accommodating. It asks nothing in return. It simply is, simply allows, simply provides the ground, the field, the context within which everything unfolds. And perhaps this is what we are really asking about when we ask whether space ends. We are asking about the limits of this hospitality, about whether there is a point beyond which no more can be accommodated, about whether the universe's capacity to allow things to exist is finite or infinite. What would it mean for openness to end? And we find, as we sit with this question, that we cannot answer it, not because we lack information, not because we need better telescopes or more advanced mathematics, but because the question itself may be pointing to something beyond the reach of answers, something that can be contemplated but not captured, something that can be wondered about but not solved. What would it mean for openness to end? We remain here with this question, letting it be what it is, letting it remain open, unresolved, mysterious. And in this remaining, in this patient dwelling, We find a kind of peace, not the peace of having arrived at an answer, but the peace of being willing to sit with uncertainty, the peace of recognizing that some things are too large, too fundamental, too mysterious to be fully grasped by our finite minds. What would it mean for openness to end? The question continues to exist. It does not go away. It does not resolve itself. But it also does not trouble us. It simply is, like space itself, like openness itself, present, patient, waiting. And we can let it be. We can let it remain a question. We can let the mystery stay mysterious. And we can find rest in that. We can find a kind of comfort in not knowing, in being small enough to not understand everything, in being humble enough to acknowledge the limits of our comprehension. What would it mean for openness to end? Perhaps it would mean nothing. Perhaps the question itself is based on a misunderstanding. Perhaps openness is not the kind of thing that can end or continue. Perhaps it simply is, timelessly, eternally, fundamentally, the ground of all being, the condition of all existence, the allowance without which nothing could be. And we can rest in that. We can let that be enough. We can allow space to be what it is, openness itself, boundless, limitless, eternal, without needing to define it more precisely, without needing to find its edges or measure its extent, without needing to know whether it ends or goes on forever. What would it mean for openness to end? The question fades gently into the background, not because we have answered it, but because we have let it be. We have honored it. We have sat with it. And now we can release it softly, allowing it to exist without our constant attention, allowing ourselves to rest in the not knowing, in the quiet acceptance of mystery. We might return for a moment to the sensation of moving outward, that slow drift through the darkness, that gentle motion away from what is familiar and into what is vast. We have been here before, in this feeling, in this movement, and we can return to it now, quietly, without any sense of repeating ourselves, because some experiences are worth returning to. Some sensations are worth feeling again, moving outward through space. Not quickly, not with purpose, but slowly, gently, letting ourselves be carried by the motion itself, drifting away from the earth, away from the sun, away from the familiar points of light that mark our corner of the universe. And as we move, as we continue this slow outward journey, we might notice something about time, about the way it feels, about the way it passes. Time seems to slow down, not in any measurable way, not according to any clock or calendar, but in the felt sense of duration, in the subjective experience of moments passing. Time begins to stretch, to expand, to become less urgent, less pressing, less important. We are moving outward through space, and time is slowing down. The galaxies pass by one, slowly, so slowly. Each one a vast collection of stars, each one containing billions of suns, billions of worlds, billions of possibilities. And we drift past them, unhurried, watching them recede into the darkness behind us, watching new ones appear in the darkness ahead. The motion is steady, continuous, but there is no sense of rushing, no sense of needing to arrive, no sense that time is limited or precious or running out. Time is slowing down. We have been asking whether space ends, whether there is a boundary, an edge, a limit to the vastness. But as time slows, as duration stretches and expands, the question begins to feel less urgent, less pressing. It is still there, still present in our awareness, but it no longer demands an answer. It no longer insists on being resolved. It simply exists, quietly, in the background, as we continue our slow drift through the darkness. Does space end? The question sits with us as we move. It accompanies us on this journey, but it does not trouble us. It does not create anxiety or confusion. It is simply there, like the stars are there, like the darkness is there, like the vast emptiness between galaxies is there, present, patient, waiting. Time is slowing down, and as time slows, as moments expand and stretch, we find that we can linger longer with each thought, with each sensation, with each aspect of this experience. We do not need to move quickly from one idea to the next. We do not need to cover ground or make progress. We can simply be here, now, in this moment, in this slow drift, letting time be as slow as it wants to be. We are moving outward through space. The motion continues, as it has continued, as it will continue, steady, unhurried, always outward, always into the darkness, always towards something we cannot see, something we cannot name, something that may not even exist. But the motion itself is peaceful, calming. There is something deeply restful about moving like this, without destination, without goal, without any need to arrive. Time is slowing down. We might notice the way the galaxies look as we pass them, the way they glow in the darkness, the way their light reaches across the vast distances, traveling for millions of years, only to arrive here, now, where we are. The light is old, ancient. It left those galaxies long ago before humans existed, before the Earth was formed, before our sun ignited. And yet it is here now, reaching us, touching us, connecting us to something distant and remote and incredibly old. Time is slowing down. The distances between galaxies are vast. We have felt this before. We have experienced this emptiness, this darkness, this tremendous space that separates one island of light from another. And as we move through this emptiness, as we cross these vast distances, time continues to slow, to stretch, to become something different from what it was, something less like a river flowing steadily forward, and more like an ocean, deep and still and timeless. We are moving outward through space, and time is slowing down. There is no hurry. There has never been any hurry. But now, as time slows, this becomes even more apparent, even more obvious. The universe is not rushing. The galaxies are not hurrying. The stars are not moving quickly through their lives. Everything is happening at its own pace, in its own time, according to rhythms that are far slower and far deeper than anything we experience in our daily lives. Time is slowing down, and we can let ourselves slow down with it. We can let our thoughts move more slowly. We can let our awareness settle more deeply into the present moment. We can let go of any sense of needing to understand quickly, or arrive at conclusions or move efficiently from one idea to the next. We can simply be here, moving slowly through space, letting time be as slow as it needs to be. Does space end? The question returns, as it has returned before, as it will return again. But it feels different now, softer, less insistent. It is not demanding anything from us. It is not creating pressure or urgency. It is simply there, floating in our awareness, patient and quiet, willing to wait as long as necessary, willing to remain unanswered, willing to exist as a question rather than resolving into an answer. Time is slowing down. We have thought about edges and boundaries. We have considered what it might mean for space to end. We have imagined walls and limits and places where existence simply stops. But as time slows, as we drift further and further into the vastness, these thoughts begin to feel distant, remote, as if they belong to some other time, some other place, some other state of mind. Here, now, moving slowly through the darkness, the question of whether space ends feels almost irrelevant. Not because we have answered it, not because we have resolved it, but because the very act of asking seems to belong to a faster pace, a more urgent rhythm, a state of consciousness that is concerned with conclusions and answers and definite knowledge. Time is slowing down, and in this slowing, in this gradual decrease in tempo, we find ourselves less concerned with knowing and more content with being, less focused on understanding and more absorbed in experiencing. The vastness surrounds us. The darkness holds us. The motion carries us forward, slowly, steadily, endlessly. We are moving outward through space. The stars are still there, scattered across the darkness. The galaxies are still visible, glowing softly in the distance. But they seem less important now, less central to our awareness. What matters more is the motion itself, the drift, the slow, continuous movement through the emptiness, the sensation of being carried gently, without effort, through space that goes on and on. Time is slowing down. We might notice that we have been here for a while now, in this state, in this motion, in this slow drift through the vastness. How long have we been moving? How far have we traveled? The questions arise, but they do not seem to have answers, or rather the answers do not seem to matter. Time has become less measurable. Distance has become less definite. We are simply here, moving, existing, being carried along by something larger than ourselves. Time is slowing down. The darkness is not frightening. It never has been. It is peaceful, restful. It asks nothing from us. It imposes no demands. It simply is, surrounding us on all sides, extending in every direction, providing the background, the context, the space within which everything exists. And we can rest in this darkness. We can let it hold us. We can trust it to be what it is. We are moving outward through space, and time is slowing down. There is a rhythm to this, a pattern. We move, we observe, we feel. We notice the galaxies, the darkness, the vastness. We return to the question of whether space ends. We let the question sit without answering it. We continue moving. We notice time slowing. We settle more deeply into the present moment. And then the cycle continues, gently, without any sense of repetition being a problem or a failure. Because repetition, in this context, is not monotonous. It is meditative. It is calming. It is the way we deepen our experience, layer by layer, moment by moment. Time is slowing down. And as time slows, as duration expands, we might find that thoughts themselves become less frequent, less insistent. There is more space between thoughts, more room for simple awareness, more opportunity to be present without thinking, without analyzing, without trying to understand or explain or make sense of anything. We are moving outward through space. The motion continues. It has always continued. It will always continue. This is not a journey with a beginning and an end. This is not a trip with a destination. This is simply motion. simply being, simply the experience of existing in space, moving through time, allowing both to be what they are without trying to control them, or define them, or make them conform to our expectations. Time is slowing down. We have considered the possibility that space is openness, that it is not a container, but a fundamental allowance, a making room for, a permission for things to exist. And as time slows, as we move more deeply into this openness, we might sense what this means, not intellectually, not as an abstract concept, but as a felt experience, as something we know in our bodies, in our awareness, in the very fact of our being here. Space is openness, and we are moving through it, and time is slowing down. The galaxies continue to pass by. They have been passing by for a while now, each one similar to the last, each one unique in its details but familiar in its general shape and structure. Collections of stars, islands of light, separated by vast distances of darkness, and we move past them, one by one, slowly, allowing each to be what it is, not rushing to the next, not hurrying to see what lies beyond. Time is slowing down. There is something deeply peaceful about this pace, about this rhythm, about the way time stretches and expands, allowing each moment to be fuller, richer, more complete. In our daily lives, time so often feels rushed, compressed. There is always more to do, more to accomplish, more to experience. But here, in this slow drift through space, there is no pressure, no urgency, no sense that we should be doing anything other than what we are already doing. We are moving outward through space, and time is slowing down. And this is enough. The question of whether space ends is still with us. It has not gone away, but it has become quieter, gentler. It sits in the background of our awareness, not demanding attention, not insisting on being resolved. It is content to remain a question, content to exist without an answer, content to accompany us on this journey without directing where we go or how we move. Time is slowing down, and perhaps we notice that we ourselves are slowing down. Our thoughts are slower. Our awareness is calmer. Our entire sense of being has shifted into a lower gear, a slower pace, a more restful state. This is not sluggishness. This is not lethargy. This is a kind of deep relaxation, a settling into what is, an acceptance of the present moment, exactly as it is. We are moving outward through space. The darkness surrounds us, as it has surrounded us, as it will continue to surround us. It is not absence, it is not void, it is presence, a different kind of presence than the presence of light, but presence nonetheless. The darkness is there, tangibly, palpably, holding us gently as we move through it. Time is slowing down. We have been drifting for a while now. How long, we do not know. Time has become difficult to measure, difficult to track. It no longer moves in clear units of seconds and minutes and hours. It moves in some other way, according to some other rhythm, some inner sense of duration that has little to do with clocks or calendars. Time is slowing down, and in this slowing, in this gradual deceleration, we might find ourselves letting go of things, letting go of the need to know, letting go of the desire to understand, letting go of any expectation that this journey should lead somewhere, or teach us something, or provide us with answers. We can simply be here, in this motion, in this moment, in this slow drift through the vastness. We are moving outward through space, and time is slowing down, and we are letting go. The stars are distant points of light. The galaxies are soft glows in the darkness. The emptiness between them is vast and quiet and peaceful. And we are here, moving through it all, part of it all, held by it all. Not separate from space, but existing within it. Not observing from outside, but participating from within. Time is slowing down. There is nothing we need to do, nowhere we need to go, nothing we need to understand or accomplish or achieve. We can simply rest in this motion, rest in this moment, rest in this slow, continuous drift through the darkness. And as we rest, as we settle more deeply into what is, time continues to slow, continues to stretch, continues to become more spacious and open and accommodating. Time is slowing down. The question of whether space ends has become very quiet now, almost inaudible. It is still there, somewhere in our awareness, but it is no longer important, no longer central. What is central is this: the motion, the darkness, the vastness, the slow passage of time, the deep peace that comes from letting go of all urgency, all pressure, all need to arrive or conclude or resolve. We are moving outward through space, and time is slowing down, and we are at peace. The galaxies drift by, slowly. The darkness holds us, gently. Time stretches and expands, generously. And we continue moving, always drifting outward, always carried by something larger than ourselves, always held by the vastness, always safe in the openness, always at home in the mystery. Time is slowing down, and we can let it slow. We can let it become as slow as it needs to be. We can let moments stretch and expand until they feel almost eternal, until each moment contains everything, until there is no need for the next moment, because this moment is complete, is sufficient, is enough. We are moving outward through space, and time is slowing down, and we are here, now, in this eternal present, in this timeless motion, in this peaceful drift through the vastness that has no end, and no beginning and no boundary. Time is slowing down, and we rest in this, we settle into this. We allow this to be what it is, without needing it to be anything else, without wanting it to change or resolve or conclude. We are simply here, moving slowly, existing peacefully, being held gently by the darkness and the vastness and the openness of space. Time is slowing down, and we can let it slow. We can let it slow as much as it wants. We can let time become almost nothing, almost still, almost stopped. And in that near stillness, in that deep quiet, we can rest. We can be at peace. We can exist without effort, without struggle, without any need to do anything other than what we are already doing. We are moving outward through space, and time is slowing down, and all is well. The question has been with us for some time now. Does space end? It arrived quietly, settled into our thoughts, and remained there as we moved through these reflections, these slow considerations, these gentle wanderings through darkness and vastness and openness. And now, perhaps, it is time to let the question begin to fade, not to answer it, not to resolve it, but simply to allow it to soften, to recede, to become less central to our awareness. Does space end? We can ask it once more, gently, without any pressure. We can let the words form, let them sit in our minds for a moment, and then let them begin to dissolve, like mist in morning sunlight, like ripples on water gradually smoothing back into stillness. The question has served its purpose. It has given us something to consider, something to sit with, something to allow our thoughts to move around and through. And now it can begin to fade. Does space end? The words are becoming quieter, less distinct. They are still there, but they are losing their sharpness, their clarity, their insistence. They are becoming more like a feeling than a question, more like an atmosphere than an inquiry. And we can let this happen. We can let the question transform into something softer, something more diffuse, something that does not demand our attention, but simply exists in the background, dimly, like a distant star. We have been moving outward through space. We have been drifting through the darkness, past galaxies and stars, through vast emptiness, through regions of silence and stillness. And as we have moved, the question has accompanied us. It has been there, always there, a gentle presence in our awareness. But now, as we continue to drift, we might notice that the question is becoming less important, less urgent, less present. Does space end? Perhaps it does. Perhaps it does not. Perhaps the question itself is based on assumptions that do not apply to the nature of space. Perhaps space is something that cannot be spoken about in terms of ending or continuing. Perhaps it simply is, and all our attempts to define it, to limit it, to understand it through the categories we are familiar with, perhaps these attempts are beside the point. We can let this uncertainty be. We can let it exist without troubling us, without creating anxiety or confusion or frustration. The not knowing can be peaceful. The absence of an answer can be restful. We do not need to solve every question that arises in our minds. We do not need to resolve every mystery. Some things can remain mysterious. Some questions can remain unanswered. And this is not a failure. This is simply the way things are. Does space end? The question is fading now. It is becoming fainter, like a sound that is slowly decreasing in volume, like a light that is gradually dimming. We can still sense it, still feel its presence, but it is no longer at the center of our attention. It is drifting toward the edges of our awareness, becoming peripheral, becoming background, becoming something we might forget about for long stretches of time. And this is fine. This is natural. This is the way questions sometimes behave. They arrive, they occupy our thoughts for a while, and then they recede. They do not always stay. They do not always remain vivid and present. Sometimes they fade into the background, becoming part of the general texture of our thinking, rather than a specific focus of attention. Does space end? We are still moving through the darkness, still drifting outward, but the motion itself is becoming less distinct, less noticeable. It is as if we have been moving for so long that the motion has become our natural state. We are no longer aware of moving. We simply are. We exist. We are here, in this darkness, in this vastness, in this openness that surrounds us on all sides. The galaxies have become less frequent, or perhaps we are simply noticing them less. They pass by occasionally, points of light in the distance, but they no longer capture our attention the way they once did. They are simply there, part of the landscape, part of the environment through which we move, and we acknowledge them without dwelling on them, without focusing on them, without needing them to be anything other than what they are. Does space end? The question is very quiet now, almost inaudible. It is like a whisper that is barely loud enough to hear, like a thought that is almost forgotten before it fully forms, and we can let it continue to fade. We can let it become quieter and quieter until it is almost completely silent, until it is almost not there at all. There is a peace in this fading, a restfulness. As the question recedes, as it loses its prominence in our awareness, we find ourselves becoming more settled, more calm, more present in the moment without being pulled toward any particular thought or inquiry or consideration. We are simply here, simply being, simply existing in this slow drift through the vastness. Does space end? Perhaps the question will return someday. Perhaps at some other time, in some other context, we will find ourselves wondering again about boundaries and edges and limits. But for now, we can let it go. We can release it gently, without any sense of abandoning it or dismissing it. We can simply allow it to fade into the background, to become part of the general atmosphere of our thinking, no longer requiring active attention. The darkness is still here. It has always been here. It surrounds us completely, holds us gently, provides the space within which we exist. And as the question fades, we become more aware of the darkness itself, not as something frightening or oppressive, but as something peaceful, something restful, something that asks nothing from us and gives us everything we need. The darkness is enough. We do not need galaxies to make the darkness meaningful. We do not need stars to give it purpose. The darkness itself is sufficient. It is complete. It is whole. And we can rest in it. We can let ourselves be held by it. We can trust it to be what it is, without needing it to be anything more. Does space end? The question is almost gone now, almost silent. We can barely hear it anymore. It is like an echo that has repeated so many times it has lost all volume, like a memory that is fading with time. And we can let this happen. We can let the question dissolve completely if it wants to. We can let it disappear into the darkness, into the vastness, into the silence that surrounds us. There is no urgency. There has never been any urgency. But now, more than ever, we feel the complete absence of pressure, the total lack of any need to do anything or think anything or understand anything. We are simply here, floating in the darkness, existing in the moment, being present without any agenda or goal or destination. We might notice that our thoughts are becoming very sparse, very infrequent. There is more space between thoughts now, more silence, more stillness. And in this silence, in this stillness, there is a deep rest, a profound peace, a sense that everything is exactly as it should be, and there is nothing that needs to change or improve or be fixed. Does space end? The question is barely audible now. It is almost completely faded, almost completely dissolved. And we can let it complete its journey into silence. We can let it go entirely. We can release it from our awareness and allow it to drift away into the vastness, becoming one with the darkness, becoming one with the silence, becoming one with everything that is unsaid and unthought and unknown. The motion has slowed to almost nothing. Or perhaps we have simply stopped noticing it. Perhaps we are still drifting outward, still moving through space, but the motion has become so slow, so gentle, so subtle, that it is indistinguishable from stillness. We might be moving. We might be still. It no longer matters. The distinction has ceased to be important. We are here. That is enough. The galaxies are gone now, or so far away that we cannot see them. The stars have faded. The points of light have disappeared. There is only darkness now, vast, complete, total darkness. And it is not frightening. It is not oppressive. It is peaceful. It is restful. It is exactly what we need in this moment. The darkness holds us. And we can let ourselves be held. We can let go of any remaining tension, any remaining effort, any remaining sense that we should be doing something, or thinking something, or understanding something. We can simply rest, simply be, simply exist in this darkness, in this silence, in this deep and profound peace. Does space end? The question is gone. It has faded completely. It has dissolved into the darkness, into the silence, into the vastness. And we do not miss it. We do not need it. We are content without it. We are at peace without it. We can exist here, in this moment, without any questions at all, without any thoughts at all, without anything except the simple fact of being here, now, present, alive, existing. There is nothing to understand. There is nothing to solve. There is nothing to accomplish. There is only this darkness, this silence, this peace. And it is enough, more than enough. It is everything we need. We might stay here for a while, in this state, in this deep rest. There is no need to move, no need to think, no need to return to anything. We can simply be here, suspended in the darkness, held by the silence, at peace in the vastness. And time can pass, or time can stop, and it makes no difference. We are beyond time now, beyond motion, beyond questions and thoughts and concerns. We are simply here, and the darkness is with us, the silence is with us, the peace is with us. They have always been with us, but now we notice them more fully. We feel them more completely. We rest in them more deeply. And there is nothing else we need, nothing else we want, nothing else we are seeking or striving for or hoping to find. This is enough. This is complete. This is whole. The vastness extends in all directions, infinitely, eternally, without boundary or limit or end. Or perhaps it does not. Perhaps there is an edge somewhere, a boundary, a place where space stops and something else begins. But we do not know. We cannot know. And it does not matter. Because we are here, now, in this moment. And the vastness is here with us. And the darkness is here with us. And the peace is here with us. And we can rest. We can let ourselves settle completely into this rest. Let ourselves sink into it. Let ourselves be absorbed by it. There is no resistance, no holding back, no part of us that is still trying to understand or control or direct what is happening. We are simply here, allowing everything to be as it is, accepting everything exactly as we find it. The question has gone, the motion has stopped, the thoughts have ceased. There is only this deep, profound silence, this complete, total peace, this rest that has no end and no beginning and no boundary. We are here, and we can stay here as long as we need to, as long as we want to. There is no schedule, no timeline, no moment at which we must return to thinking or questioning or moving. We can remain in this rest indefinitely. We can let it hold us for as long as it wants to hold us. We can trust it completely. The darkness is not empty. It is full, full of silence, full of peace, full of rest. And we are part of it. We are held by it. We are one with it. There is no separation between us and the darkness, between us and the vastness, between us and the peace. We have dissolved into it, and it has dissolved into us. And there is only this single unified experience of deep rest. We might not even be aware of ourselves anymore. The sense of being a separate individual, a distinct person, a particular consciousness, this sense might have faded along with the question, along with the thoughts, along with everything else that has dissolved into the silence. We might simply be awareness itself now, pure presence, existence without identity, being without boundaries. And this is peaceful, this is restful, this is complete. There is nothing missing, nothing lacking, nothing that needs to be added or changed or improved. Everything is exactly as it should be. Everything is perfect in its completeness. Everything is whole. The darkness continues to hold us. The silence continues to surround us. The peace continues to permeate everything. And we rest. We simply rest, without thought, without question, without any awareness of time passing or distance traveled or anything at all, except this deep, profound, complete rest. We are at peace. We are at rest. We are here, in the darkness, in the silence, in the vastness, and there is nothing else we need to be, nothing else we need to do, nothing else we need to know. This is enough. This has always been enough, and we can let ourselves rest here, peacefully, quietly, completely, for as long as we need, for as long as we want, for as long as this moment lasts, which might be forever, which might be no time at all, which might be something beyond time entirely. We rest. We are at peace. We are complete. The question has faded completely. It is gone. It has dissolved into the darkness, into the silence, into the vastness. And we have dissolved too, in a way. We have become part of the peace, part of the rest, part of the silence. And there is no distinction anymore between what we are and where we are and what we are experiencing. There is only this darkness, only this silence, only this peace, only this rest. And it is enough. It has always been enough. It will always be enough. We can rest here, in this knowledge, in this peace, in this deep and profound silence, without any need for anything else, without any desire for anything more, without any question or thought or concern. We are here, we are at peace, we are resting, and all is well. The darkness holds us gently, the silence surrounds us completely, the vastness extends infinitely in all directions, and we are part of it all, we are held by it all, we are one with it all, and we rest, deeply, completely, peacefully, without end, without boundary, without any need for anything except this simple, profound, complete rest. We are here, in the darkness, in the silence, in the peace, and we can stay here as long as we need to, as long as we want to, as long as this moment lasts, which might be forever, which might be now, which might be both, which might be neither. We rest, we are at peace, we are complete, and the question, wherever it has gone, whatever has become of it, is no longer our concern. It has faded, it has dissolved, it has become one with the darkness and the silence and the vastness, and we have become one with the darkness and the silence and the vastness too. And there is only this, only rest, only peace, only silence, only darkness, only this deep, profound, complete sense of being exactly where we need to be, exactly as we are, without any need for anything to change or improve or become different. We are here. We are at rest, we are at peace, and all is well. All has always been well. All will always be well. We rest completely, peacefully, here, now, in the darkness, in the silence, in the vastness, forever. As we come to the end of this quiet journey, there is nothing you need to remember, and nothing you need to hold on to. If sleep has already found you, may it be gentle and deep. And if you are still awake, may these thoughts fade softly into the background of the night. Wherever you are, and however you are listening, thank you for sharing this calm moment. May the quiet stay with you.